The morning coffee tastes different when you're drinking it alone. Not bitter. I've been making the same pot for 43 years, but emptier somehow, like the flavor got lost somewhere between the kitchen counter and my lips. I sit at the same oak table Caroline and I picked out at that estate sale in Millbrook, running my thumb over the ring stain where her mug used to rest. 3 years since the funeral, and I still set out 2 cups before catching myself. The garage door squeaks when I raise it, same protest it's made every morning since 1987. I keep meaning to oil those hinges, but some sounds become part of the routine. The Buick sits where it always has, next to Caroline's empty parking space. I sold her Camry 6 months after she passed. Couldn't stand looking at it, but I've never moved my car to the center. Some spaces are meant to stay empty. I built this garage with my own hands the summer Ethan turned 8. Extended it twice over the years, as my construction business grew. Added the workbench where I taught him to sand wood properly, how to measure twice and cut once. Patience builds character. I used to tell him, watching him struggle with a stubborn piece of pine. Anyone can tear something down. It takes skill to build it right. He'd roll his eyes like kids do, but he'd listen. Always was a good listener when he was small. Before college, before Jennifer, before he learned that listening was optional if you thought you knew better. The wedding photo on my dresser catches the morning light just right. Caroline in her grandmother's lace dress, me in a rented tux that cost more than I made in a month back then. Ethan's baby picture sits beside it, all chubby cheeks and gap-toothed grin. Sometimes I stare at that photo and wonder when exactly that little boy disappeared, when the son who used to help me fix fence posts on weekends became the man who calls twice a year on holidays, his voice carrying the particular strain of obligation. The lake house keys hang on the hook by the back door, brass worn smooth from decades of weekend trips. Caroline loved that place, said the water reminded her of her childhood summers in Michigan. We bought it the year before Ethan was born, a modest cabin on Clear Lake that we slowly expanded room by room as the business prospered. Every board, every nail, every windowsill had our fingerprints on it. I'm thinking about driving up there this weekend, maybe putting in the dock for the season, when gravel crunches in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I see Ethan's silver SUV pulling up, followed by a car I don't recognize. My chest tightens. Not my heart this time, just the familiar wariness that comes when your son shows up unannounced with company. Ethan climbs out wearing khakis and a polo shirt, every inch the successful marketing executive he's become. Behind him emerges Jennifer, blonde hair, perfectly styled, despite the March wind, carrying herself with that particular grace of women who've never had to worry about money. From the second car step, 2 people I've met exactly twice. Jennifer's parents, Gerald and Patricia Whitmore. Gerald adjusts his sport coat like a man preparing for a business meeting. Patricia clutches her purse with both hands. I open the front door before they can knock a habit from my construction days. Better to meet problems head on than let them fester on your doorstep. Dad. Ethan's smile is bright, but doesn't reach his eyes. Hope you don't mind us dropping by. We wanted to talk to you about something important. I step back, gesturing them inside. The house suddenly feels smaller, with 4 additional people in it, their presence somehow diminishing the familiar comfort of my morning routine. Patricia's eyes sweep the living room, taking inventory. The photos on the mantel, Caroline's reading chair, the handmade quilts folded precisely over the sofa back. Coffee, I offer, because Caroline raised me to be hospitable, even when I don't feel like it. That would be lovely, Patricia says, though. Her tone suggests she's being polite rather than grateful. I pour 5 cups, noting how Gerald examines the kitchen with the calculating gaze of a man who appraises things for a living. Jennifer perches on the edge of Caroline's chair, not sitting fully, as if she doesn't quite belong there, which she doesn't. So, I say, settling into my usual spot at the head of the table. What's this important matter that brings you all here on a Thursday morning? Ethan and Jennifer exchange a look, one of those married couple glances that carry entire conversations. Gerald clears his throat. Richard. He begins using my full name, though I've asked him twice to call me Dick. We've been discussing family arrangements, and we think it's time to have an honest conversation about your future. The word future lands heavy in the room. I set down my coffee cup carefully, the porcelain clicking against the saucer louder than it should. My future seems to be going along just fine, I say evenly. Patricia leans forward, her voice taking on that syrupy tone people use when they think you're not quite bright enough to understand. Of course it is, dear. but we're thinking about what's best for everyone long term. You're all alone in this big house, and with your heart condition. My heart condition is managed, I cut in. Still, Ethan says, jumping in like he's been waiting for his cue. We worry about you out here by yourself. This place is getting too much for one person to maintain. I look around the kitchen at the cabinets I installed. Myself the floor I refinished last spring. The window over the sink that provides the perfect view of Caroline's rose garden. Too much to maintain. As if 40 years of home ownership had taught me nothing about taking care of what's mine. I manage fine, I say. We know you do, Jennifer says quickly. But Dad, she pauses as if testing whether she has the right to call me that. We've been thinking about consolidation, bringing the family closer together. Gerald nods enthusiastically. Exactly. And since my retirement didn't go quite as planned, he shoots a meaningful look at Patricia. We've been exploring different living arrangements. The pieces click together in my mind like gears in an old watch. I've seen this dance before in other families, watched grown children circle aging parents like vultures waiting for the right moment. But I never thought I'd see it at my own kitchen table, orchestrated by my own son. What exactly are you proposing? I ask. Ethan straightens the way he used to when reciting homework answers he wasn't quite sure about. We think you should consider moving somewhere more suitable. A nice retirement community, maybe something with activities and medical support nearby. And this house? He gestures broadly. Well, it would be perfect for Jennifer's parents. They need a place, and you'd have one less thing to worry about. The silence that follows is heavy enough to crack foundation stones. I can hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking the refrigerator, humming the faint whistle of wind through the weather, stripping on the back door. Small sounds that have been the soundtrack of my life for decades. Let me make sure I understand, I say slowly. You want me to sell my home so your in-laws can live in it and move myself into an old folks' home. A retirement community, Patricia corrects. And we wouldn't expect you to sell. We'd work out some arrangement rent, maybe a lease agreement. How generous, I say, and this time I don't bother hiding the edge in my voice. Ethan's jaw tightens. Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help. Help who exactly? Everyone. You'd have support. Gerald and Patricia would have a home, and we'd all be closer as a family. I stand up my chair, scraping against the linoleum. Through the kitchen window, I can see the bird feeder Caroline hung from the oak tree, the one she filled faithfully every morning for 15 years, until arthritis made it too difficult. After she died, I took over the job. Not because I particularly cared about the birds, but because some traditions are worth preserving even when the person who started them is gone. This is my home, I say quietly. I built most of it with my own hands. My wife picked out every piece of furniture, every paint color, every doorknob. Her roses are blooming in the backyard, her books are still on the shelves, her apron is still hanging in the pantry. And you want me to hand it over to people I barely know, so I can go sit in some sterile room and wait to die? That's not, Jennifer starts. That's exactly what it is, I interrupt. You dress it up with words like family and consolidation. But what you're really saying is that my life, my home, my choices don't matter anymore because I'm old and in the way. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Gerald's face flushes red above his collar. Patricia's mouth forms a thin line. Jennifer stares at her hands, and Ethan looks like a boy caught in a lie he thought was clever. We'll give you time to think about it, Ethan says, finally standing. But Dad, this is happening. One way or another, changes are coming. It would be better if you were part of the solution instead of the problem. They file out of my kitchen without finishing their coffee, their presence leaving behind only the faint scent of Patricia's perfume and the echo of words that can't be taken back. I watch from the window as they huddle by their cars, no doubt discussing strategy. Next steps, how to handle the stubborn old man who won't see reason. When their taillights disappear down the lane, I sit back down at my table and finish my coffee. It's stone cold now, but I drink it anyway because wasting it would feel like surrender. I look at Caroline's photo on the mantle at her knowing smile, and I can almost hear her voice. They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they? No, I think they don't, but they're about to find out. I've spent 40 years building things that last. Houses, businesses, relationships. I know how to lay a foundation, how to make something solid that won't collapse under pressure. And I know something else, something Ethan apparently forgot during all those years of college and corporate success. The man who built this house from nothing isn't going to hand it over to anyone, not without a fight they'll never forget. Write one word that describes your feelings after watching this video. The call comes 3 days later while I'm replacing the garbage disposal. My hands are covered in pipe grease when the phone rings, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but the caller ID shows Ethan's number, and something tells me this isn't a conversation I can avoid. "Dad, we're having Sunday dinner this weekend. Jennifer's making her famous pot roast." His voice carries that forced cheer people use when they're trying to pretend the last conversation never happened. "We'd love to have you over. The whole family will be there." The whole family. That phrase sits heavy in my stomach like undercooked bread. In the 3 years since Caroline died, family dinners have become exercises in polite endurance, everyone walking on eggshells around topics that might upset the old widower. I'd stopped going 6 months ago, claiming I was too tired or too busy with house projects. The truth was simpler. I was tired of being treated like a fragile antique that might break if handled roughly. "What time?" I ask, because sometimes the only way through a thing is straight ahead. 2 o'clock and Dad. Just think about what we discussed. Okay, I really believe this could be good for everyone. After I hang up, I stand in my kitchen holding a wrench and looking at the half-assembled plumbing beneath my sink. 43 years of marriage taught me that Sunday dinners are never just about food. They're about territory, about establishing who belongs where in the family hierarchy. Caroline understood this, instinctively could read the undercurrents in a room like a meteorologist reading storm patterns. I finished the disposal installation in silence, testing the connections twice before I'm satisfied. Good plumbing, like good construction, requires attention to detail. Cut corners and you'll be dealing with leaks for years. Sunday arrives gray and humid, the kind of September day that makes you grateful for air conditioning. I drive the 20 minutes to Ethan's subdivision in my pickup truck, past identical lawns and mailboxes houses that look like they were built from the same blueprint with minor variations. Ethan and Jennifer's place sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a front porch that's never seen anyone sit on it. The driveway is already crowded with cars. I recognize Jennifer's mother's Lincoln, her brother Michael's BMW, her sister Sarah's minivan. Through the front window, I can see people moving around the living room, wine glasses in hand, the easy body language of family members who genuinely enjoy each other's company. I park on the street and walk up the brick path, noting the way the landscaping screams professional installation, perfectly symmetrical, expensive, and utterly without personality. Caroline would have hated it. She believed gardens should look like they grew naturally, with surprises tucked into corners and plants that came back year after year because they belonged. Jennifer opens the door wearing an apron over a sundress, her smile bright enough to power the neighborhood. "Dick, I'm so glad you could make it. Everyone's here." The living room buzzes with conversation and laughter. Michael stands by the fireplace talking stocks with Gerald, while Sarah's husband Tom demonstrates his new smartphone to Patricia. Children weave between the adults like schools of fish carrying juice boxes and trailing cracker crumbs. It's the kind of scene Norman Rockwell might have painted if he'd lived to see suburban prosperity. Ethan appears at my elbow with a beer. "Dad, you remember everyone, right? Mike, Sarah, the kids." I nod and smile and make the appropriate noises, but I'm watching the room's dynamics the way conversations pause when I approach, then resume with careful enthusiasm. I'm the guest who requires special handling, the elderly relative who might say something embarrassing or politically incorrect if not properly managed. Uncle Dick, Sarah's youngest, a gap-toothed 7-year-old named Emma, launches herself at my legs. "Mommy said you built your whole house by yourself, like with hammers and everything." "That's right, sweetheart. Took me 3 summers." "That's so cool. Can you teach me to build something?" Before I can answer, Sarah appears and gently extracts her daughter. "Emma, don't bother Uncle Dick. He's retired now." The word retired hangs in the air like a judgment, as if retirement meant I'd lost the ability to hold a conversation or operate basic tools. We file into the dining room for dinner, a formal affair with good china and cloth napkins. I'm seated at the foot of the table, the spot traditionally reserved for honored guests or elderly relatives who need easy access to the bathroom. Jennifer's pot roast is perfectly prepared. The conversation flows around topics safe for mixed company vacation plans, the weather local school board, elections. Then Gerald clears his throat and taps his knife against his water glass. Before we get to dessert, I'd like to say something. The table quiets, all eyes turning toward him. Patricia and I want to thank Dick for his incredible generosity regarding the house situation. My fork freezes halfway to my mouth. Around the table, faces show various degrees of confusion and interest. Michael leans forward slightly. Sarah glances between Gerald and me with raised eyebrows. We know this wasn't an easy decision. Gerald continues his voice, taking on the practiced cadence of a man accustomed to giving speeches. Moving away from a place you've called home for so long. But your willingness to let us take over the property so you can transition to a more suitable living arrangement, well, it means the world to us. The silence that follows is deafening. I can hear the grandfather clock in the hallway, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of children playing in the backyard. Every eye in the room is on me, waiting for my response to Gerald's announcement. I'm sorry, I say slowly, setting down my fork. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Gerald's smile falters slightly. Oh, Ethan said you'd agreed to the arrangement. The house transfer, the retirement community placement. I haven't agreed to anything. I cut in my voice, calm, but carrying enough edge to slice through the comfortable family atmosphere. Ethan's face goes pale. Dad, we talked about this. You said you'd think about it. I said I'd think about it. I didn't say I'd do it. Jennifer jumps in quickly, her hostess instincts kicking in. Well, of course these things take time to work out all the details. There are no details to work out, I interrupt. Because I'm not selling my house, I'm not moving to a retirement home, and I'm not turning my property over to anyone. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Patricia sets down her wine glass with a sharp click. Michael and Sarah exchange glances that suggest they're witnessing more family drama than they bargained for. Tom suddenly becomes very interested in his mashed potatoes. Gerald recovers first, his salesman training is kicking in. Now, Dick, I understand this is emotional, but you have to be practical. That house is too much for one person to manage. The yard work alone? I manage my yard just fine. But for how long? Patricia chimes in. What happens when you fall off a ladder? When you can't handle the stairs? When you need medical attention and there's no one around to help? I look around the table at these people, my son, my daughter-in-law, her family, and I see something that makes my chest tight with a different kind of pain than my heart condition. I see people who have already written me off, already decided that my independence is negotiable, my wish is secondary to their convenience. Let me tell you what I manage. I say, my voice steady, but strong enough to carry to every corner of the room. I manage a 4-bedroom house that I built with my own hands. I manage 3 acres of property that my wife and I landscaped over 30 years. I manage the memory of 43 years of marriage in every room, every corner, every piece of furniture we chose together. And I manage to do it all without asking anyone for help or permission. Ethan's jaw tightens. Dad, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Or am I being an adult who refuses to be managed by people who think age equals incompetence? Sarah clears her throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should change the subject. No, I say firmly. Let's finish this conversation. Because apparently my son has been telling people I've agreed to arrangements I know nothing about. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a lie. The word lie hits the table like a dropped plate. Emma, who's been listening with the wide-eyed fascination children have for adult drama, pipes up. What's Uncle Dick talking about? Daddy Tom hustles her and her siblings out of the room with promises of ice cream in the kitchen. The adults left behind sit in uncomfortable silence, napkins twisted in their laps. The remains of Jennifer's perfect dinner growing cold on bone china plates. Ethan finally speaks, his voice tight with controlled anger. Fine. You want to be stubborn about this? You want to cling to that house until you're too sick or too old to make rational decisions. That's your choice. But don't expect us to come running when reality catches up with you. I stand up slowly, my joints protesting slightly, but my resolve solid as foundation concrete. I wouldn't dream of it, I say quietly. Thank you for dinner, Jennifer. It was delicious. I walk out of the dining room with my head high and my back straight past the photos of family vacations I wasn't invited on, past the comfortable furniture I helped pay for, when Ethan was starting out, past the grandfather clock that chimes hollow notes in a house that suddenly feels like a museum of other people's lives. In my truck, I sit for a moment before starting the engine. Through the window, I can see the warm glow of the dining room, see figures moving around the table, probably already discussing damage control, how to handle the stubborn old man who won't cooperate with their plans. Caroline's voice whispers in my memory, "You can't make people love you the way you love them, Richard. All you can do is love them honestly and hope they remember what that looks like when they need it most." I start the engine and drive home through the growing dusk, past houses where other families are finishing their Sunday dinners, where maybe other elderly parents are being told what's best for them, what they can and cannot handle, what they should be grateful for. But this elderly parent isn't finished making his own decisions. Not by a long shot. The war they started at my kitchen table 3 days ago just moved to their dining room. And now that I know the rules they're playing by, I can start playing by my own. I drive home through streets that know my history. Past the elementary school where Ethan learned to read, past the Little League field where I spent Saturday mornings, watching him strike out more often than he connected, past the church where Caroline and I were married on a October afternoon, much like this one 37 years ago. The weight of those years sits heavy in the truck cab, not crushing, but substantial, like carrying lumber, you'll need later. The house welcomes me back with familiar creaks and sighs. I pour myself a glass of water, doctor's orders since the heart episode 2 years ago, and sit in Caroline's reading chair by the window. Her book is still there on the side table, a romance novel with a bookmark stuck 3/4 through. I've never moved it. Some things are meant to stay exactly where they were left. Through the window, I can see her rose garden in the fading light. The late bloomers are putting on their final show before winter deep reds and pale yellows that she chose because they'd extend the season. Beauty shouldn't have to follow a schedule. She used to say deadheading spent blooms with the same care other people reserved for expensive china. The phone rings just as full darkness settles over the yard. Ethan's number again. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately play the message back. "Dad, look, today didn't go the way anyone wanted, but we need to talk about this like adults. I'll come by tomorrow evening after work, okay? We can hash this out without everyone else listening in." Hash this out. As if my refusal to surrender my home was a minor disagreement about dinner plans or holiday scheduling. As if 37 years of building a life with Caroline could be negotiated away over coffee and reasonable conversation. I delete the message and walk to the mantel where our wedding photo sits in its silver frame. Caroline's smile is exactly as I remember it, knowing patient, faintly amused by the world's foolishness. She'd been 22 in this picture, young enough to believe that love was sufficient protection against life's harder lessons. I'd been 24, old enough to know better, but too smitten to care. "They think I'm the problem," I tell her photograph. "Your son thinks his old man doesn't know what's good for him." The house settles around me with its usual evening sounds. The furnace cycling on the refrigerator, humming its low song, the occasional tick of cooling timber in the walls. These are the sounds of a life well-lived, a structure that's weathered 40 years of seasons and still stands solid. But tonight they sound different, more fragile somehow, as if Ethan's words at dinner had shaken something loose in the foundation. I walk through the rooms, slowly taking inventory. The kitchen where Caroline taught Ethan to make pancakes on Saturday mornings, where she'd sing off-key while washing dishes and I'd pretend to be annoyed. The living room, where we'd watched him take his first steps, where we'd argued over his report cards and celebrated his small victories. The master bedroom, where we'd whispered our worries about raising a child, right where we'd held each other through the long nights after her diagnosis. Every inch of this house carries our fingerprints, our choices, our history. The hardwood floors, I refinished myself when Ethan was in high school. The built-in bookcases where Caroline arranged her mysteries and gardening magazines. The window seat where she'd curl up with her knitting while winter storms rattled the glass. In Ethan's old room, I stand in the doorway looking at walls that still hold faint marks from where his posters once hung. Baseball players and rock bands, images of heroes he'd outgrown by college. We'd left the room largely untouched after he moved out Caroline, clinging to the hope that grandchildren might someday play here, that family traditions might continue in ways we couldn't yet imagine. That hope died with her, I realize. Ethan visits twice a year. If I'm lucky, stays in hotels. When he does come to town, makes polite conversation over dinner, but never lingers. The room waits for grandchildren who may never exist, at least not ones who will know their grandfather well enough to claim this space as their own. I close the door gently and return to the kitchen where Caroline's apron still hangs on its hook beside the stove. Blue gingham with tiny flowers, edges worn soft from decades of use. She'd put it on every morning, like other women put on jewelry, transforming herself from wife to homemaker with practiced grace. The phone rings again. This time, it's Jennifer's number. "Dick, it's Jennifer. I wanted to call and apologize for tonight. I don't think anyone meant for the conversation to go the way it did." Her voice carries the careful modulation of someone who's been coached on what to say, how to sound concerned without being condescending. I can picture her in their perfect kitchen, Ethan probably pacing nearby, both of them strategizing how to handle the stubborn old man. "Apology accepted," I say, though I mean nothing of the sort. "The thing is," she continues, "I think there might be some miscommunication about what we're proposing. Maybe we could start over, approach this differently." The communication seemed pretty clear to me. But that's just it. I don't think it was. When Ethan told my parents you were open to the idea, I think he was being optimistic about where the conversation was heading, not stating a fact. Optimistic. A nice word for lying softer around the edges, but meaning the same thing. "Jennifer," I say quietly, "let me ask you something. How long have you been married to my son?" 8 years next month. "And in those 8 years, how many times has he told you something was settled when it wasn't? How many times has he presented his hopes as facts?" Silence stretches across the line. When she speaks again, her voice is smaller, less certain. "I think you should talk to Ethan directly about this." "I plan to." After she hangs up, I sit at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pencil, the same tools I've used for planning construction projects for 40 years. At the top of the page, I write options and underline it twice. Option 1, give in. Sell the house, move to some sterile retirement community, spend my remaining years playing bingo and complaining about the food, while Ethan's in-laws plant different flowers in Caroline's garden. Option 2, fight. Document everything, contact a lawyer, make it clear that my property rights aren't negotiable and my living arrangements aren't up for family vote. Option 3, the nuclear option, cut. Ethan off, financially change my will, make it clear that disrespect has consequences and family loyalty flows both ways. I stare at the 3 options for a long time, the pencil heavy in my hand. 40 years of construction work taught me that every project begins with a foundation, and you can't build anything solid on ground that shifts under pressure. What Ethan did tonight, lying to his wife's family, presenting fiction as fact, trying to use social pressure to force my compliance that was shifting ground. Outside, the security light kicks on as a raccoon wanders across the back patio. The motion sensor was Caroline's idea, after a summer when something kept getting into her tomatoes. "I want to see what I'm dealing with," she'd said. "Can't solve a problem if you don't understand it first." I look at the legal pad again and add a 4th option. Understand the problem first. Find out exactly what Ethan has told people, what arrangements he thinks he's made, what timeline he's working with. Gather intelligence before deciding on strategy. The pencil feels steadier in my hand now. I've spent 40 years building things that last: houses, businesses, relationships. But I've also spent 40 years tearing down structures that were poorly planned, inadequately supported, or built on foundations that couldn't bear the weight. Maybe it's time to apply those skills to family architecture. I tear the page from the legal pad, fold it carefully, and slip it into Caroline's cookbook, where she used to keep important reminders. Tomorrow, when Ethan comes to hash this out, I'll be ready with questions instead of answers, listening instead of arguing. Caroline's voice whispers through memory. "You catch more flies with honey than vinegar, Richard. But sometimes you need to know exactly what kind of flies you're dealing with before you decide what bait to use." I turn off the kitchen light and check the locks, a nightly ritual that's become more meaningful since this afternoon's dinner theater. Through the window over the sink, I can see the outline of Caroline's rose garden, thorny stems dark against the lighter sky. She always said roses were good practice for marriage, beautiful if you handled them right, but capable of drawing blood if you got careless. Tonight, as I climb the stairs to our bedroom, I'm thinking about thorns and honey, about foundations, and shifting ground, about the difference between optimism and lies. And I'm thinking about a son who seems to have forgotten that the man who taught him to measure twice and cut once might still have a few tricks left in his toolbox. The war Ethan started at my kitchen table is far from over, but the battlefield just shifted to ground I know better than anyone the house that Caroline and I built together, room by room, year by year, with our own hands and our own dreams. Let him come tomorrow with his reasonable voice and his strategic apologies. Let him try to hash out what he thinks is a done deal. He's about to learn that some foundations don't shift, no matter how much pressure you apply. Monday morning arrives with the kind of sharp clarity that follows a sleepless night spent planning. I'm in the kitchen by 5:30, coffee brewing, watching the sun paint Caroline's garden in shades of gold and amber. The legal pad sits open beside my mug. Last night's options now expanded into a detailed action plan, written in the same methodical style I once used for construction estimates. At 7 sharp, I dial Marcus Henley's office. Marcus handled the legal work when I incorporated my construction business, drew up our wills after Caroline's diagnosis, and guided me through the paperwork maze after her death. More importantly, he's the kind of lawyer who remembers that some things matter more than billable hours. Richard Dalton, his secretary, announces when she puts me through. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? Could be better, Marcus. I need to see you today if possible. It's about family legal matters. Trouble with Ethan. Marcus has known my son since he was 12 years old, watched him grow from a curious kid who asked good questions to a young man who thought he had all the answers. He's also seen enough family disputes to recognize the warning signs. Something like that, can you squeeze me in this morning? 9:30 work for you. Marcus's office occupies the second floor of a restored Victorian downtown, all dark wood and leather-bound law books that have actually been read. He greets me with the firm handshake of a man who spent 40 years helping people solve problems they never thought they'd have. Coffee? He offers, gesturing toward the chair across from his mahogany desk. Already had my quota. I settle into the familiar leather, noting how the morning light through his windows reminds me of the reading nook Caroline loved in our living room. Marcus, I need to understand my legal position regarding my property. He pulls out a fresh legal pad pen, poised. What kind of pressure are we talking about? I tell him everything. The kitchen ambush, the Sunday dinner theater, the lies presented as settled facts. Marcus listens without interrupting, occasionally making notes, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. They can't force you to sell, he says when I finish. The house is titled in your name alone, but they can make your life miserable in other ways, especially if Ethan has any legal authority you've granted him. What kind of authority? Power of attorney, healthcare directives, anything that gives him decision-making power if you become incapacitated. Marcus flips through a file folder. We set up basic documents after Caroline died, but let me refresh my memory on the specifics. While he reviews paperwork, I study the framed photographs on his desk, family pictures spanning decades, children growing up, grandchildren appearing, the visual record of a life well lived. I wonder if any of those smiling faces have ever looked at Marcus and seen only an obstacle to their convenience. Good news, Marcus says, looking up. The power of attorney documents we prepared are very specific about incapacity requirements. Ethan can't just decide you're incompetent because you disagree with his plans. You'd need medical documentation from 2 independent physicians. And if I wanted to revoke his authority entirely, we can draft new documents this week. But Richard, are you sure that's the route you want to take? Family relationships are harder to repair than legal ones. I think about Sunday dinner, about Gerald's speech presenting fiction as fact about Ethan's face when I called him a liar in front of his wife's family. Some breaks are clean surgical necessary to prevent infection. Draft the papers, I say. And Marcus, I want to review my will, make sure it reflects my current thinking about family loyalty. His eyebrows rise slightly, but he makes notes without comment. Anything else? Property protection? What's the strongest legal position I can establish to prevent any future challenges to my ownership? Transfer to a trust with you as sole trustee. Gives you complete control during your lifetime, but makes the property much harder to challenge or manipulate after your death. He leans back in his chair. Richard, this feels like you're preparing for war. War's already started, Marcus. I'm just making sure I have adequate defenses. I spend the next hour reviewing documents, signing papers, establishing legal boundaries that should have been unnecessary. By the time I leave his office, I have a file folder, thick with protections and a clearer understanding of exactly where I stand. The hardware store is my next stop. Bob Patterson has owned Patterson's Hardware for 30 years. Long enough to remember when I was buying materials for major construction projects instead of small repair jobs. He greets me with the easy familiarity of someone who's sold you everything from roofing nails to Christmas lights. Morning, Dick. What brings you in today? Home security system. Nothing fancy, just something that'll let me know if anyone's been around when I'm not home. Bob's expression shifts slightly. In a town this size, word travels fast, and Bob's the kind of man who hears most of it. Everything okay out at your place? Just being cautious. What would you recommend? He leads me to a display of cameras and motions sensors, simple systems designed for homeowners who want basic protection without monthly monitoring fees. We select a setup that'll cover the front and back entrances, the driveway, and the garage. You want me to install this for you? Bob offers. I can handle it. Still remember which end of a screwdriver to hold. Bob chuckles, but his eyes remain serious. Dick, I don't know what's going on, but if you need anything at all, you give me a call. Okay? I shake his hand, grateful for the kind of friendship that doesn't require explanation. Appreciate that, Bob. Back home, I spend the afternoon installing cameras with the methodical patience that 40 years of construction work taught me. Each unit goes exactly where it'll provide maximum coverage wires, run cleanly through walls, control panel mounted in the kitchen, where I can monitor everything from my morning coffee spot. The irony isn't lost on me. I'm installing security equipment to protect myself from my own son, treating family like potential intruders. But trust once broken leaves sharp edges that cut both ways. By 4 o'clock, the system is operational. Smartphone app, installed, motion alerts configured. I test each camera, watching myself on the small screen as I walk around my own property like a trespasser. The technology feels foreign in my hands. Caroline would have laughed at the sight of me learning to use apps and digital controls, but the peace of mind feels solid as good lumber. Ethan's car pulls into the driveway at 5:15, right on schedule. Through the kitchen window, I watch him sit in the driver's seat for a full minute, probably rehearsing his approach, gathering his arguments. When he finally emerges, his body language is careful, controlled, the walk of a man entering negotiations. He can't afford to lose. I open the front door before he can knock, same as always. Some habits survive, even family warfare. Dad. His smile is cautious but genuine. Thanks for agreeing to talk. Come in. Coffee. That'd be great. We perform the ritual of host and guest, despite everything that's passed between us. I pour 2 cups, noting how Ethan's eyes catalog the kitchen, looking for changes. Signs of decline, evidence to support his narrative of an old man who can't manage alone. Nice and quiet out here, he says, settling into Caroline's chair at the table. I like quiet. I know you do. But, Dad, isn't it? Maybe too quiet. When's the last time you had a real conversation with someone? When's the last time you went somewhere besides the hardware store and the grocery? The questions are carefully crafted, designed to highlight my isolation, my dependence on routine. He's building a case brick by brick for why his intervention is necessary. I talked to Marcus Henley this morning, I say mildly. Had a very interesting conversation about legal protections and family authority. Ethan's coffee cup pauses halfway to his lips. What kind of conversation? The kind where I learned exactly what rights I have regarding my own property, my own decisions, my own life. I lean back in my chair, studying his face. Turns out I have more control than some people might prefer. Dad, I never said you didn't have control. No, you just told your wife's family that I'd agreed to arrangements I knew nothing about. You presented your wishful thinking as settled fact. In construction, we call that building on a foundation that doesn't exist. His jaw tightens. I was trying to move things forward, get everyone on the same page. Whose page exactly? Because it wasn't mine. We sit in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken accusations heavy between us. Through the window, I can see the motion sensor light in the backyard, ready to illuminate anything that moves in the darkness. Dad, Ethan says, finally, his voice carrying a different tone, not pleading, but something harder. I'm trying to help you here. But if you're going to make this difficult, if you're going to lawyer up and treat your own family like enemies, then maybe we need to reconsider our approach. What kind of reconsideration? The kind where we stop asking nicely and start doing what's necessary. His mask slips slightly, revealing something colder underneath. You're 71 years old, with a heart condition, living alone in a house that's too big for you. If something happens, if you become incapacitated, decisions will get made whether you like them or not. There it is. The threat wrapped in concern, the ultimatum disguised as family worry. I recognize it now for what it's always been, not an offer of help, but a demand for surrender. I see, I say quietly, and who exactly would be making these necessary decisions? People who care about your welfare more than your pride. I stand up, my movements deliberate and unhurried. Ethan, I want you to leave now. Dad, I want you to leave, and I want you to understand something very clearly. This is my house. These are my decisions. And if you think you can pressure me into giving up either one, you've seriously miscalculated who you're dealing with. He stands too, his face flushed with frustration. Fine, be stubborn, but don't come crying to me when reality catches up with you. I wouldn't dream of it. After his taillights disappear down the lane, I sit in Caroline's chair and review the afternoon's conversation. The recording app on my phone caught every word, another piece of technology I've learned to use since this morning. Some insurance policies come in unexpected forms. Outside, the security cameras keep their silent watch motion sensors ready to alert me to any unusual activity. Inside, legal documents sit in Marcus's safe, establishing boundaries that should protect what Caroline and I built together. The war Ethan started has entered a new phase, but the battlefield is still my home, and I know every inch of this ground. Let him make his threats about necessary decisions and incapacitated old men. Let him underestimate the man who built this place from nothing, who survived the death of his wife, who learned to use smartphone apps at 71, because protecting what matters requires adapting to whatever tools are available. Tomorrow, I'll call the bank at review. My accounts make sure no one has access they shouldn't have. I'll check with the county recorder's office, verify that all my property documents are current and unambiguous. And I'll wait. Because in construction, timing matters as much as materials, and the right moment to strike is worth more than all the pressure in the world. The first sign that Ethan isn't finished comes on a Thursday morning, while I'm replacing weather stripping around the front door. A silver sedan I don't recognize pulls into my driveway, followed by Ethan's SUV. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I watch a woman in her 50s emerge from the sedan, professional attire, clipboard, the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. Ethan introduces her as Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Elder Care Assessment Services. The name alone sets my teeth on edge, but I invite them in because sometimes the best defense is knowing exactly what you're up against. Mr. Dalton. Dr. Martinez begins settling into my living room with practiced ease. Your son has expressed some concerns about your living situation. I'm here to conduct a basic wellness evaluation just to make sure you have the support systems you need. I pour coffee for all three of us, noting how Ethan's eyes follow my movements, probably looking for signs of shakiness, confusion, any evidence to support whatever story he's been telling. His expression carries the particular satisfaction of a man who thinks he's gained an advantage. What kind of concerns? I ask, settling into my own chair. Dr. Martinez consults her clipboard. Social isolation, property maintenance challenges, and some questions about decision-making capacity regarding major life changes. The phrase decision-making capacity hangs in the air like smoke from a faulty furnace. I recognize it from my research after Monday's lawyer visit the clinical language used to justify removing someone's autonomy. I see. And who requested this evaluation? Family members who care about your welfare? She replies smoothly, not quite answering the question. For the next hour, she walks through my house with the methodical thoroughness of a home inspector, asking questions about my daily routine, my medical care, my social connections. She notes the security cameras, interesting choice for someone living alone, and spends considerable time examining Caroline's untouched sewing room. You've maintained your wife's space exactly as she left it. She observes, making notes. How long has she been gone? 3 years, 4 months, 12 days. Ethan shoots me a look that says, I've just provided evidence for his case. Grieving widowers who count days aren't making healthy progress according to whatever manual Dr. Martinez follows. And you've made no changes to accommodate your current needs. Perhaps convert the space to something more practical. That room contains 40 years of my wife's projects. Her quilting, her sewing, her patterns. Why would I change it? More notes. The wrong answer, apparently. She interviews me about my finances. Do you manage your own banking? My medical care? When did you last see a physician? And my social activities. Besides your son, who do you interact with regularly? Each question feels designed to highlight deficiencies, gaps in the support system that might justify intervention. When she finishes, Dr. Martinez packs her clipboard with the efficiency of someone who's reached predetermined conclusions. Mr. Dalton, while you appear to be managing adequately at present, there are some areas of concern. Your social isolation, the attachment to objects associated with grief, and the resistance to practical changes that could improve your safety and well-being, such as downsizing to a more manageable living situation, accepting family assistance with major decisions, establishing regular medical monitoring. She glances at Ethan. Your son is clearly invested in your welfare. Working together, you could develop a transition plan that addresses these concerns proactively. After they leave, I sit in my kitchen reviewing the encounter. The evaluation felt less like healthcare and more like reconnaissance gathering ammunition for battles to come. I call Marcus immediately. They can't force a competency hearing based on one assessment, he assures me. But Richard, they're building a case. Document everything: who came, what they said, what they examined. If this escalates to legal proceedings, we'll need a paper trail. That evening, I drive to the lake house for the first time since Caroline's death. The 40-minute journey through familiar countryside gives me time to think, to remember why this property matters beyond its monetary value. The cabin sits on 12 acres of wooded shoreline, every board and stone placed with Caroline's input. We bought it the second year we were married, back when it was little more than a foundation and dreams. Over 3 decades, we'd transformed it room by room into our retreat from the world, the place where we'd planned to spend retirement together, watching grandchildren learn to fish from our dock. Inside, dust covers furniture we'd chosen together, but everything else remains exactly as we left it. Caroline's reading glasses on the side table, the jigsaw puzzle we'd started the weekend before her diagnosis, the photo albums where she'd documented every improvement, every addition, every perfect sunset over the water. I stand on the deck, watching darkness settle over the lake, and I understand with perfect clarity what I'm really fighting for. Not just the house in town, but the physical manifestation of a marriage, the proof that Caroline and I built something beautiful together. My phone buzzes with a text from Ethan. Hope you're thinking about what Dr. Martinez said. We just want what's best for you, Dad. I delete the message without responding. Friday brings another unwelcome visitor. This time, it's a real estate appraiser, a young man named Kevin, who claims to be conducting a routine market analysis of properties in my neighborhood. I watch from the kitchen window as he measures my lot, photographs the house from multiple angles, and makes extensive notes about the property's condition. When he knocks on the door, I'm ready with questions of my own. Who requested this appraisal? I'm not at liberty to discuss client information, he says, consulting his tablet. But I can tell you this is preliminary market research, not a formal appraisal for sale purposes. Market research for what? Property valuation, trends, potential development opportunities. He shrugs. Standard stuff. After he leaves, I call Bob Patterson at the hardware store. In a town this size, Bob hears about everything real estate related before it becomes public knowledge. Dick, I hate to tell you this, but there's been talk about your property. Someone's been asking around about zoning regulations, development potential, what it might be worth, subdivided. Someone? Couldn't get a name, but the description sounds like your boy Ethan. The pieces click together like well-fitted joints. The welfare evaluation, the market appraisal, the pressure to move. Ethan isn't just trying to house his in-laws. He's positioning to profit from my displacement, probably planning to sell or develop property that's been in our family for 40 years. That night, I make 2 phone calls. The first is to Dr. Sarah Chen, my primary physician since Caroline's death. I schedule a complete physical and cognitive assessment, establishing current documentation of my mental and physical health before anyone can question it. The second call is to my old friend Tom Brewster, who runs the only investigative service in the county. Tom's a retired state trooper who specializes in background checks and domestic investigations, exactly what I need. Tom, I need you to look into some people for me, my son, his wife, her parents, financial records, legal proceedings, anything public that might explain why they're suddenly so interested in my welfare. Family troubles. the kind that might get expensive if I don't understand what I'm dealing with. Tom promises to have a preliminary report within a week. In the meantime, I begin my own investigation, starting with the county clerk's office where property records are public information. What I find there makes my stomach turn. Ethan has been researching my property for months, pulling records, checking tax assessments, reviewing zoning regulations. The dates on his requests go back to January, long before any conversation about my living arrangements, long before Dr. Martinez's evaluation. This isn't sudden concern for my welfare. It's a carefully planned campaign to gain control of assets worth nearly $500,000. I drive home through afternoon shadows, my hands steady on the wheel, despite the fury building in my chest. 40 years of construction work taught me to channel anger into useful action, to let outrage fuel precision rather than destruction. Back home, I spread county records across my kitchen table like blueprints for a complex project. Property values, zoning maps, development potential, all the information Ethan has been gathering while presenting himself as a concerned son, worried about his aging father. The hypocrisy burns worse than the betrayal. All those years of helping him financially, the college loans I forgave the down payment assistance for his first house, the business loan I co-signed when his consulting firm was struggling. I'd seen it as investment in his future support any loving father would provide. He'd seen it as precedent for his right to my assets. Caroline's photo on the mantel catches the evening light, her smile as knowing as ever. I can almost hear her voice. Now you see what you're really dealing with, Richard. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The security system chimes as a car turns into my driveway. Jennifer's BMW alone this time. Through the camera feed, I watch her sit in the driver's seat for several minutes, phone pressed to her ear. When she finally emerges, her expression carries the determined look of someone executing a difficult but necessary task. Dick, she calls through the front door. Could we talk, just the two of us? I let her in, noting how her eyes immediately scan the living room, taking inventory the same way Dr. Martinez had. But Jennifer's assessment feels different, less clinical, more personal. She's cataloging memories rather than deficiencies. I remember this room from our wedding planning, she says, settling onto the couch. Caroline was so excited about the reception, kept showing me photos of other families' celebrations. She loved a good party. She did. Jennifer's smile is genuine, tinged with sadness. Dick, I need to be honest with you. Ethan didn't ask me to come here. Why did you? She takes a breath, gathering courage for whatever she's about to reveal. Because I found something in his home office. Documents, research plans for your property that go back months. And because I finally understand what's really happening here. My pulse quickens, but I keep my expression neutral. What did you find? Everything. The property assessments, the development feasibility studies, the financial projections. Her voice drops to almost a whisper. Dick, he's not trying to help you. He's trying to position himself to inherit while you're still alive, to be grateful for his generosity. The words hang between us like a confession neither of us wanted to hear. But sometimes truth arrives wearing uncomfortable clothes, and you have to decide whether to let it in or keep living with comfortable lies. Why are you telling me this? I ask. Because it's wrong. Because this isn't the man I married, and I can't be part of what he's planning. She reaches into her purse and pulls out a flash drive. Copies of everything I found. Do with it what you think best. After she leaves, I sit in my darkening kitchen, holding 8 gigabytes of evidence that my son has been planning my financial dismantling for most of a year. The computer files detail everything: property values, development costs, projected profits from subdividing my 12 acres into luxury home sites. My house isn't just my home to him, it's inventory waiting to be liquidated. But as I upload Jennifer's files to my computer, I feel something I haven't experienced since Caroline's death: the cold satisfaction of superior intelligence gathering its tools for war. Ethan has been planning this campaign for months, but he's made one crucial miscalculation. He's assumed that his aging father would be too confused, too isolated, too dependent on family approval to fight back effectively. He's about to learn just how wrong that assumption was. The real war begins now. Tom Brewster's report arrives on a Tuesday morning, disguised as a simple manila envelope with no return address. Inside, 23 pages of financial records, court documents, and public filings paint a picture of my son that would make Caroline weep if she were here to see it. Ethan's consulting business is hemorrhaging money. Client contracts terminated for poor performance, unpaid invoices stretching back 8 months, a second mortgage on his house that I knew nothing about. The man who's been telling me how to manage my finances can't manage his own. But the most damning document is a loan application dated 6 weeks ago, before Dr. Martinez's visit, before the family dinner, before any conversation about my living arrangements. The application lists my property as anticipated collateral and includes a note about elder care transition, creating opportunities for asset liquidation. I read that phrase 3 times, each reading making my chest tighter. Asset liquidation. Not inheritance, not family legacy, not preserving what Caroline and I built together. Just assets to be liquidated when the inconvenient old man is safely warehoused somewhere. I'm still absorbing the implications when my security system chimes. Through the camera feed, I watch Gerald and Patricia Whitmore emerge from their Lincoln, both dressed like they're attending a board meeting. They walk to my front door with the confident stride of people who believe they're delivering good news. I open the door before they can knock a habit that's becoming more strategic than polite. "Richard." Gerald begins his salesman smile bright as fresh paint. "We were hoping we could have a conversation about the transition timeline." "What transition?" Patricia steps forward, her voice carrying the gentle firmness of someone explaining simple concepts to a slow child. "Moving you to Meadowbrook Assisted Living. We've been touring facilities and there's a lovely place just 20 minutes from Ethan's house. They have an opening next month. How thoughtful of you to look into that without asking me." Gerald's smile falters slightly. "Well, we assumed. Ethan said you were warming up to the idea." Ethan says a lot of things. Most of them turn out to be wishful thinking. I invite them in because I want to hear exactly how far this conspiracy extends, how many lies have been told in my name. They settle into my living room like conquering generals dividing territory. Patricia already eyeing Caroline's antiques with the appraising gaze of someone planning an estate sale. "The thing is," Gerald continues, "we're quite excited about the possibilities here. This house has such potential, and the property, well, the development opportunities are extraordinary." Development opportunities. "Nothing drastic," Patricia rushes to add. "Just some thoughtful improvements to maximize the land use. Perhaps a guest cottage, maybe subdivide the back acreage for additional income." Additional income. For whom exactly I keep my expression neutral while my blood pressure climbs. "Of course we'd want to honor Caroline's memory," Gerald adds. "Keep the rose garden, maintain the character of the place. But there's no reason the property can't be more productive." They spend the next 20 minutes outlining their vision for my home, my 40-year investment in love and sweat and dreams, as if it were a development project awaiting their enlightened management. Patricia has ideas about updating the kitchen Caroline designed. Gerald wants to modernize the workshop, where I taught Ethan to use tools properly. When they finish their presentation, I sit quietly for a moment, letting them interpret my silence as consideration rather than fury. "It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this," I say finally. "We have," Patricia beams. "We really think this could work out wonderfully for everyone." Everyone except me. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Gerald's practiced smile becomes fixed artificial. "Richard, you'd be much happier at Meadowbrook. They have activities, medical support, people your own age, people my own age who've given up making their own decisions. I stand my movements deliberate and unhurried." "Gerald, Patricia, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about my property, but there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding here." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Patricia asks. "The kind where you think my home is available for your development dreams." I walk to the mantel and pick up Caroline's photo, holding it where they can see her face. This house belongs to me and to her memory. It's not for sale, not for rent, not for improvement, and certainly not for people who think they can rearrange an old man's life to suit their convenience. Gerald's mask slips entirely. "Now, see here, Richard. Ethan assured us that arrangements had been made. We have already given notice on our current lease. Then I suggest you find somewhere else to live, because this house isn't available." They leave in a flurry of indignation and barely concealed threats about talking to Ethan about this misunderstanding. Through the window, I watch them gesticulate angrily in my driveway, probably already planning their next move. But I'm 3 moves ahead now, thanks to Tom's investigation and Jennifer's conscience. I know about Ethan's debts, his loan applications, his timeline for turning my displacement into his salvation. More importantly, I know exactly how to stop him. The phone rings an hour later. Ethan, of course. Dad, what the hell did you say to Gerald and Patricia? I told them the truth, that this house isn't available for their occupancy or their development schemes. Development schemes. Dad, they just want to make some improvements. Improvements that coincidentally align with your loan application, listing my property as anticipated collateral. Silence. Long enough that I wonder if the call dropped. When Ethan speaks again, his voice carries a different edge, not anger, but something colder. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. Dad, you don't understand the whole situation. I'm in some financial difficulty, and if we could just work together. Like the way we worked together when you told Dr. Martinez I was showing signs of incompetence. Like the way we worked together when you had my property appraised without telling me. Another silence. I can almost hear him calculating, weighing options, deciding how much truth he can afford to reveal. It doesn't have to be adversarial, he says finally. We're family. Family helps each other. You're right about family helping each other. That's why I helped you with college, with your first house, with your business loans. That's why I've written checks whenever you asked, no questions, no conditions. And I'm grateful. But gratitude apparently has a statute of limitations. Because somewhere along the way, you decided that helping you meant sacrificing everything I've worked for. I hang up before he can respond, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Some conversations end when there's nothing left to say that won't make things worse. That evening, I drive to the lake house and sit on the deck, watching the sun set over water that holds 40 years of reflections. Caroline and I swimming on hot summer afternoons. Ethan learning to fish from this same dock, squealing with delight when he caught his first bluegill. Family barbecues where the only arguments were about whether the burgers were done enough. In the growing darkness, I make the phone call. I've been avoiding since this nightmare began. Marcus, it's Richard. I need you to prepare new documents. What kind of documents? Power of attorney revocation updated will trust modification. I want Ethan removed from any legal authority over my affairs, and I want my inheritance plans restructured. Richard, are you sure about this? These are permanent changes to family relationships. I think about asset liquidation, about development opportunities, about a son who counts his inheritance while his father is still alive to be grateful. I'm sure. And Marcus, I want to establish a foundation. The Caroline Dalton Memorial Foundation focused on supporting families dealing with elder care challenges. I want to endow it with the lake house property. That's a significant gift, Richard. It'll have substantial tax implications, and it means the property won't be available for family inheritance. I understand exactly what it means. The next morning, I wake with the clarity that comes from making hard decisions correctly. I'm not acting out of spite or anger, but out of the same practical wisdom that's guided every major choice in my adult life. You protect what matters, you honor what's sacred, and you don't reward betrayal with blessing. I spend the day photographing every room of both houses, documenting the life Caroline and I built together. Not for legal purposes, but for memory. When the foundation takes ownership of the lake house, when new estate documents eliminate Ethan's expectations, I want to remember what we accomplished together. The doorbell rings just as I'm finishing in Caroline's sewing room. Through the security camera, I see Ethan standing on my porch, but this time, he's not alone. Jennifer waits in their car, her face pale even through the camera's distortion. I open the door to find my son looking older than his 35 years. His usual confidence replaced by something that might be desperation. Dad, we need to talk. Really talk. About everything. I step aside, letting him enter. Some conversations have to happen face to face, even when you know they won't end well. Jennifer told me she gave you copies of my files, he says, without preamble. She did. So you know about the financial problems, the loan applications, all of it. I know you've been planning to profit from my displacement for months while pretending to be concerned about my welfare. He slumps into Caroline's chair, his head in his hands. It's not that simple, Dad. I'm drowning. The business is failing. We're behind on everything, and Jennifer's pregnant. The last piece of information hits me like a physical blow. A grandchild. The continuation of our family line the reason Caroline had kept Ethan's room unchanged for so many years. Congratulations, I say quietly. I panicked, okay? I saw how much this property was worth, and I thought if I could just help you see that moving somewhere smaller would be better for you, then maybe we could work something out that helped everyone. By lying to your wife's family, by having me evaluated for incompetence, by listing my property as collateral for loans I didn't authorize. I never meant for it to go that far. It just snowballed. I sit across from him, looking at this man who carries half my genes and none of my values. Caroline's grandchild growing in Jennifer's womb, a baby who will inherit whatever legacy we leave behind. Ethan, I say slowly, what you meant doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you did, and what you did was try to steal my life while I was still living it. Dad, please, I can fix this. I can make it right. No, you can't, because trust once broken doesn't heal back to its original strength. You can patch it, but the break always shows. I stand my decision made. Your inheritance is gone, Ethan. The will's being changed, the power of attorney revoked, the properties transferred to foundations that will honor your mother's memory properly. His face goes white. You can't do that. I can, and I have, but I'm not heartless. There's a college fund for the baby set up so you can't touch it, but the child will have education expenses covered. That's my gift to my grandchild, not to you. He leaves without another word, and I watch through the window as he sits in his car for 10 minutes, probably telling Jennifer that his inheritance gamble has failed completely. That night, I sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea reviewing the documents Marcus prepared. My signature on each page feels like a period at the end of a long, difficult sentence. The war is over. I have won, but victory tastes different than I expected. Not sweet, not bitter, just final. Caroline's photo smiles at me from the mantel, and I raise my teacup in a small salute. It's done, sweetheart. The house is safe, your memory's protected, and the baby will be taken care of properly. Outside, the security system keeps its silent watch over property that's no longer anyone's inheritance, but everyone's legacy. The quiet feels different now. Not empty, but complete. 3 months pass before I hear from Ethan again. 3 months of mornings that begin with coffee, and Caroline's photograph of evenings spent reading in her chair by the window of the particular peace that comes from knowing your house truly belongs to you and no one else. The silence from my son feels different than the previous years of polite distance. This isn't the casual drift of busy lives. It's the deliberate quiet of a bridge that's been burned on both sides. I'd expected anger arguments, maybe even legal challenges to the inheritance changes. Instead, there's been nothing. Not even acknowledgement that his financial Hail Mary had failed completely. The call comes on a Tuesday afternoon while I'm winterizing the lake house. Caroline always insisted we close it properly for the season, draining pipes and covering furniture with the same care she brought to everything worth preserving. Dad, Ethan's voice carries a humility I haven't heard since he was 12 years old and confessing to breaking my favorite fishing rod. Could we talk? I set down the wrench I'm using to shut off the main water valve. I'm listening. Not on the phone, in person. I'm at the end of your driveway. Through the lake house windows, I can see his SUV parked where the private road meets the county highway. He's been sitting there for who knows how long, working up the courage to call. Come on up, I say. I watch him drive slowly up the gravel road, his headlights cutting through the November dusk. He parks beside my truck and sits for a full minute before emerging like a man preparing for surgery. The last 3 months have aged him. His face is thinner, his clothes less precisely arranged. He walks to the porch with none of his old confidence, just the careful steps of someone who's learned that solid ground can shift without warning. Thank you for letting me come up, he says. I nod toward the porch chairs Caroline and I used to occupy during our evening talks. Sit. The November air carries the scent of wood smoke from someone's fireplace, the earthier smell of leaves composting in the forest. Above us, the first stars are beginning to pierce the darkening sky. It's the kind of evening Caroline loved best, crisp enough for sweaters, quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. Jennifer had the baby, Ethan says after we've settled into an uncomfortable silence. A girl, 8 pounds 3 ounces. We named her Caroline. Yet the news hits me like a gentle punch to the solar plexus. Caroline. My granddaughter carries my wife's name, will grow up hearing stories about the woman whose photograph sits on my mantel, whose memory I've spent 3 months protecting from those who'd trade it for convenience. How's Jennifer doing? Good, tired but good. She wanted me to give you this. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small wrapped package. Photos, and an invitation to meet your granddaughter if you're willing. I take the package but don't open it immediately. Some gifts require the right moment, the proper reverence. I lost the business, Ethan continues. Had to declare bankruptcy. The house is gone too. We're living in a rental now, something we can actually afford. He looks out toward the lake, its surface black glass reflecting the emerging stars. Turns out, trying to steal from your father doesn't improve your credit rating. I never tried to destroy your business, Ethan. I know, I did that all by myself. He's quiet for a moment, watching a loon call across the water. Do you want to know the worst part? It wasn't just about the money. I was angry at you for being okay after Mom died, for not falling apart the way I thought you should. The admission hangs between us like smoke from a dying fire. I think about the months after Caroline's funeral, the way I'd held myself together through sheer will and practical necessity, how that composure had probably looked like indifference to a son who was drowning in his own grief. I wasn't okay, I say quietly. I just didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Someone had to keep going, keep the house running, keep her memory alive properly. I see that now, but then I thought you didn't need anything, didn't want anything from me, so I started thinking about what I needed from you instead. A fish jumps somewhere out on the lake, the splash echoing across the water like a small applause. Caroline used to say that sound meant the evening was officially beginning time to pour a glass of wine and watch the world slow down. The foundation is official now, I tell him. The lake house will become a retreat for families dealing with elder care challenges. People who need a quiet place to make difficult decisions, to grieve, to figure out how to honor their parents without losing themselves. Ethan nods slowly. Mom would like that. I think so too. We sit in comfortable silence for a while. Two men who have said too much and not enough, who've learned that family relationships can survive almost anything except the assumption that they should survive everything. Dad, Ethan says, finally, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect to be welcomed back like nothing happened. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I lost. Not just the inheritance, not just the money. I lost the right to call myself your son without shame. I opened the package he brought, revealing a stack of photographs. Baby Caroline sleeping in Jennifer's arms. The infant's tiny fist wrapped around her mother's finger. A close-up of her face that shows Caroline's chin, my wife's stubborn jawline already asserting itself. She has her grandmother's look, I say. Jennifer thinks she has your eyes. In the growing darkness, I study the photos by the porch light, seeing echoes of the woman I loved in this newest member of our fractured family. Caroline had always wanted, grandchildren had kept Ethan's old crib in the attic, just in case, had pointed out children's clothing in store windows, with the hopeful attention of someone expecting miracles. I'd like to meet her, I say. Jennifer was hoping you'd say that. Maybe we could bring her by sometime. Not to the house, I understand that's not appropriate anymore. But maybe here or somewhere neutral. Here's fine. The foundation won't take ownership for another few months. Until then, it's still the place where your mother planned to rock her grandchildren. Ethan's voice cracks slightly. I'm sorry, Dad. For all of it. For lying for the schemes, for treating you like an obstacle instead of my father. I'm sorry for letting grief turn me into someone Mom wouldn't recognize. I look at this man who carries my name and Caroline's stubborn streak who's learned hard lessons about the difference between wanting something and deserving it. The anger I've carried for 3 months doesn't disappear, but it transforms into something more manageable. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement that some mistakes teach lessons worth more than the relationships they cost. Apology accepted, I say. But Ethan, things can't go back to the way they were. Too much trust got broken for that. I know. If you want a relationship with me, if you want your daughter to know her grandfather, it has to be built on new ground. No expectations, no assumptions about what I owe you or what you're entitled to. I understand. We sit until full darkness settles over the lake, until the loons begin their evening conversations, and the first hint of frost glazes the porch railing. When Ethan finally leaves, he drives slowly down the gravel road, his taillights disappearing into the forest like distant promises. I finish closing the lake house by lamplight, draining the last pipes, and covering the furniture that Caroline chose with such care. In a few months, other families will sit in these chairs, other children will learn to fish from this dock, other couples will watch sunsets from this deck, while making decisions about love and duty, and the weight of growing old. The drive home takes me past houses where other families are settling in for the evening, where perhaps other elderly parents are navigating the complicated waters of adult children who confuse love with management. I think about Dr. Martinez's assessment about Gerald and Patricia's development, dreams about the particular cruelty of being told your independence is negotiable by people who've never had to fight for it. At home, I pour myself a glass of water and sit at the kitchen table with baby Caroline's photos spread before me. In her sleeping face, I see the future, a child who'll grow up knowing that her grandfather stood his ground, that some things are worth protecting even when the cost is higher than you'd planned to pay. The security system chimes as a raccoon triggers the backyard motion sensor. Through the camera feed, I watch it investigate Caroline's bird feeder, looking for dropped seeds with the patient thoroughness of a creature that understands persistence pays off. I think about tomorrow's plans, winterizing the main house, reviewing foundation and documents, with Marcus perhaps driving to the bookstore to buy something suitable for reading to a granddaughter when she's old enough to appreciate stories. The quiet doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels earned. Outside, the wind moves through the oak trees. Caroline and I planted our second year here, their bare branches creating patterns against the star-filled sky. She used to say November was her favorite month, because it didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was, the season between abundance and rest when the year's work was done, and you could finally see what you'd built. I turn off the kitchen light and climb the stairs to our bedroom, where Caroline's photo waits on the nightstand. Tomorrow I'll call Jennifer about bringing the baby for a visit. Tomorrow I'll begin learning how to be a grandfather, on my own terms, in my own time, in my own house that no one can take away. But tonight I'm simply a man who protected what mattered most and lived to see the wisdom of that choice. The war is over, the territory secured, the legacy preserved. And in the end, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Spring arrives early, the year baby Caroline turns 6 months old. I'm in the garden, preparing Caroline's rose beds for their annual resurrection, when Jennifer's car pulls into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watch her extract the baby from her car seat, with the practiced efficiency of a mother who's learned to manage diaper bags and infant schedules with military precision. The visits have become a monthly ritual since that November evening at the lake house. Carefully orchestrated at first neutral locations, limited time, Ethan waiting in the car, while Jennifer brings the baby inside. But trust, I've learned, can be rebuilt in small increments, like laying stone for a foundation that needs to bear weight gradually. "She's been asking for you," Jennifer says as I open the front door. It's an exaggeration 6-month-old babies don't ask for specific people, but I appreciate the fiction. Baby Caroline gurgles contentedly in her carrier, her dark eyes taking in the familiar surroundings of my living room, with the focused attention of someone cataloging important information. "How's she sleeping?" I ask, settling into my chair, while Jennifer arranges the baby's things with practiced efficiency. "Better. Finally sleeping through the night, most of the time." Jennifer looks tired, but content carrying herself with the particular grace of women who've discovered they're stronger than they thought. Ethan's been getting up with her when she's fussy. He's actually pretty good at it. She doesn't say this to convince me of anything, just sharing information the way people do, when they're not trying to manage someone else's reactions. It's taken months for our conversations to reach this level of honest normalcy. I lift baby Caroline from her carrier, marveling again at how perfectly she fits in the crook of my arm. She studies my face with the serious concentration she's inherited from her grandmother, occasionally reaching out to touch my nose or grab at my reading glasses. She's getting heavy, I observe. 17 pounds at her last checkup. The pediatrician says she's in the 95th percentile for height, going to be tall like her grandfather. We sit in comfortable quiet while baby Caroline explores the fascinating territory of my shirt buttons and watch band. Through the window, I can see the rose garden beginning its slow emergence from winter dormancy, tiny green shoots pushing through soil that Caroline enriched with 40 years of coffee grounds and careful attention. "The foundation paperwork is almost complete," I tell Jennifer. "We should be able to officially transfer the lake house by summer. Ethan will want to know, He asks about it sometimes, about whether you're sure you want to give it up. I consider this. 6 months ago, Ethan's interest in my property decisions would have triggered suspicion in defensive calculations about ulterior motives. Now, it feels like something else, maybe concern, maybe curiosity about whether his father is making choices he'll regret. I'm sure, I say. The place deserves to be used properly, not sitting empty while I decide whether I'm ready to make new memories there. Baby Caroline has discovered my wedding ring, turning it around my finger with the determined focus of an engineer studying mechanical systems. The gold is worn thin after 43 years of marriage, scratched and dented by decades of construction work, but it still catches the afternoon light the way it did the day Caroline slipped it onto my hand. Have you thought about what you'll do with the extra time? Jennifer asks. When you're not maintaining two properties, it's a good question. For the past 40 years, my identity has been built around work. First construction, then property management, then the careful stewardship of places Caroline and I had made our own. The prospect of genuine retirement of days without specific maintenance tasks or seasonal preparations feels both liberating and vaguely terrifying. I might teach, I say, surprising myself with the admission. The community college has been asking me to run workshops on traditional building techniques. Young people these days learn from YouTube videos, but they miss the fundamentals. That sounds perfect for you. Baby Caroline has moved on from my wedding ring to the more interesting challenge of my shirt pocket, where she's discovered a pencil stub I'd forgotten about. I gently extract it before she can test its edibility, earning a look of mild indignation that's pure Caroline, my wife, not my granddaughter, though the resemblance is becoming more pronounced every month. How's Ethan doing with the new job? I ask. Jennifer's expression shifts slightly, the careful neutrality that enters conversations when we approach topics that might lead to uncomfortable territory. Better. It's not what he was making before, but it's steady, and he seems lighter somehow, like the pressure's off. The pressure of trying to manage an inheritance he wasn't going to receive, I think, but don't say. Some observations are better left unspoken, even in conversations built on careful honesty. He's been asking if he could come with us sometime. Jennifer continues. Not to push anything, just to see you with Caroline. With the baby, she clarifies quickly. He wants to see how you are together. I adjust baby Caroline's position, supporting her head, while she continues her systematic exploration of my shirt. She's found the pen clip in my pocket now, her tiny fingers working to understand how it moves, how it catches and releases. Even at 6 months, she shows signs of the mechanical curiosity that might someday lead her to appreciate the satisfaction of building things that last. Next month, I say finally. Tell him next month would be fine. Jennifer's relief is visible but understated. She's learned not to push, not to assume that small concessions indicate larger forgiveness. The distinction matters, and I appreciate that she understands it. We spend the afternoon in the garden, baby Caroline napping in her carrier, while Jennifer and I work on the rose beds. She has good instincts for the work, asking questions about soil preparation and pruning techniques with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. Caroline would have loved teaching someone else about these roses, I tell her as we finish mulching the last bed. She always said gardening was too important to keep to yourself. Maybe you could teach baby Caroline when she's older. Make it a grandfather thing. The thought appeals to me more than I'd expected. The image of a small girl in overalls learning to deadhead, spent blooms, and understand the patience required for real beauty carries enough emotional weight to make my chest tight, with something that isn't grief this time, but possibility. As they're preparing to leave, Jennifer hesitates at the front door, baby Caroline sleeping peacefully in her carrier despite the activity around her. Richard, she says she's never been comfortable calling me Dad, and I've never pushed for it. I want you to know that Ethan thinks about what happened, not obsessively, but he carries it, the knowledge of what he almost destroyed. Good, I say, meaning it. Some mistakes should leave permanent marks. That's how we remember not to repeat them. He's different now, more careful with people, more honest about his limitations. The bankruptcy, losing the house, it was terrible, but it also freed him from trying to be someone he wasn't ready to be. I watch her navigate baby Caroline's car seat with the competent movements of practiced motherhood, making sure everything is secure before backing carefully out of my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I see her wave as they disappear around the curve that leads back to the main road. That evening, I sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee watching the sun set behind trees that Caroline and I planted when they were saplings. The security cameras record their usual evening footage of rabbits and squirrels, the domestic wildlife that's inherited our property, along with me. The phone rings just as full darkness settles over the yard. Marcus Henley's number. Richard, I've got the final foundation documents ready for your signature. The Caroline Dalton Memorial Foundation is officially approved by the state. You can transfer the lake house property whenever you're ready. Good. Schedule it for next month. There's something else. The community college called my office today. They're serious about that teaching position. Want to know if you'd consider developing a full curriculum for traditional building techniques. I think about classrooms full of young people who've never felt the satisfaction of raising a wall that's perfectly plumb, who've never learned that good work requires patience more than speed. There's something appealing about passing on knowledge that took 40 years to accumulate, about ensuring that skills don't disappear when the people who possess them do. Tell them I'll think about it. After we hang up, I walk through the house, turning off lights and checking locks with the automatic precision of someone who's performed these rituals for decades. In the bedroom, Caroline's photo catches the glow from the hallway, light her smile as knowing as ever. The granddaughter's growing up strong, I tell her. Smart too. She's going to need watching that one. Too curious for her own good. I can almost hear Caroline's laugh, the way it used to fill our bedroom, during those late-night conversations about hopes and worries, and the 1,000 small decisions that shape a family's future. She'd have loved baby Caroline's stubborn determination, would have spent hours reading to her and teaching her the names of flowers and the proper way to hold a kitten. But she'd also be proud, I think, of how I've protected what we built together. Not just the physical property, but the principles that guided our marriage: honesty, mutual respect, the understanding that love doesn't mean sacrificing your autonomy to someone else's convenience. The next morning brings another surprise visitor. Through the security camera, I watch Ethan's car pull slowly into the driveway, but this time, he's alone. He sits behind the wheel for several minutes, the same hesitation he's shown since that November evening at the lake house, then emerges with the careful movements of someone who's learned that confidence is earned rather than assumed. I open the door before he can knock, noting how the morning light reveals new lines around his eyes, the kind that come from sleepless nights with an infant, and the particular stress of rebuilding a life from financial rubble. Dad, he says, and the word carries weight it hasn't held in years. Could we talk? I have something I want to show you. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from handling. When he unfolds it, I recognize my own handwriting, a letter I'd written to Caroline during my recovery from heart surgery, when I'd been thinking about mortality and legacy and the things that matter most. I found this in Mom's jewelry box when we were packing up after the bankruptcy, Ethan says. Jennifer thought I should read it. It's a letter about building things that last, about the difference between inheritance and legacy, about hoping that our son would understand someday that the most important things we could leave him weren't material, but moral. I'd forgotten writing it, but seeing it now brings back the clarity I'd felt during those uncertain weeks when my heart was learning to beat steadily again. She kept it, I say. She kept everything that mattered to her, including this. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small wooden box I'd made for Caroline's 40th birthday. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, is the ceramic mug I'd thought was lost, the one from our honeymoon, chipped but irreplaceable. I want you to have this back, Ethan says. It belongs here with you, in the house where Mom used to drink her morning coffee. I take the mug, carefully feeling its familiar weight, remembering the shop in Vermont where Caroline had insisted on buying matching cups, even though we could barely afford the honeymoon, much less souvenirs. She'd used this mug every morning for 20 years, until a moving accident had chipped the handle, after which she'd retired it to the china cabinet for special occasions. Thank you, I say, and mean it. We stand in my kitchen, two men who have said terrible things to each other, who've broken trust in ways that leave permanent scars, but who share something that transcends their failures, the memory of a woman who taught them both that love is a verb, not just a feeling. Dad, Ethan says quietly, I want to be the kind of father to Caroline that you were to me before I forgot how to appreciate it. Then be that, I tell him. Not for me not to make up for what happened, but because she deserves a father who understands that raising children is about building character, not managing outcomes. He nods the gesture, carrying the weight of promises he's finally ready to keep. When he leaves, he drives slowly down the lane, not rushing toward whatever comes next, but taking time to see where he's been. I wash Caroline's mug carefully and set it in the dish drainer to dry. Tomorrow morning, I'll use it for my coffee, and the day after that, and for all the mornings that remain to me. Some traditions are worth preserving even when the people who started them are gone. Outside, spring continues its patient work of renewal, coaxing green from brown earth, teaching the world again that some things endure, regardless of the weather they have weathered. In Caroline's garden, the roses are beginning to show their first true leaves, preparing for another season of the beauty that requires both time and tending to achieve. And in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by the life we built together, I understand finally that this is what victory looks like, not the defeat of enemies, but the preservation of what matters most through all the seasons of challenge and change. The foundation is solid, the legacy is secure. The future, whatever it holds, will be built on ground that won't shift under pressure. It's enough, more than enough. It's everything a man could ask for. If you have seen something like this in real life, write too.